morning, everybody. My name is John Giardinelli, and I am Association Counsel. As we move towards the August 13th date for implementation of the new MLS rules, I want to remind you there's a lot going on at the association, from classes, from legal panels, all sorts of information, broker owner meetings, you name it. So keep in touch with the association's website and look out for announcements and other information. So last week I had a meeting with the Commissioner of the Department of Real Estate, Deputy Commissioner Lerner, who is actually in charge of all of the legal aspects, because I wanted to talk to him about what the department's view is towards all of these MLS settlement changes, and how are they going to view the licensees and the behavior of the licensees once these new policies are implemented. And they pointed out a couple of things I just want to bring to your attention as we move towards August 13th. Number one is they want to make sure that real estate professionals understand they have a legal obligation to conduct their business in a certain way, that the code of ethics isn't changing, that the rules regarding broker supervision aren't changing. Nothing is changing, and so it will continue to be incumbent upon real estate licensees to act according to the standard of care. But of course, the standard of care is going to be a moving target for a couple of months while we all get used to this new way of doing business. They believe that there needs to be particular attention to those agents who will act as dual agents, because there's going to be a lot of room for misrepresentation. There's going to be a lot of room for error. And so they want to make clear that when you're acting in a dual agency capacity, you are essentially acting as a fiduciary to both the buyer and the seller. They're very concerned about broker supervision. You know, there's going to be some new rules. Your buyer's agents are going to have written agreements no later than August 13th. There's going to have to be special training. You're probably going to have to update your policies and procedures manuals, and you're going to have to supervise it. The things like advertising and the proper forms and the material disclosures and all those kinds of things. So broker supervision is going to take on a lot more effort and a lot more training. The issue of being a fiduciary having fiduciary responsibility to your client's not going to change, but the practices may change in terms of making sure that you have an adequate written agreement with your buyers before you start touring, making sure that you're totally honest with clients, and making sure that you do whatever it is you promise to do. And so they're going to be monitoring that very carefully. And lastly, but most significantly, they are very concerned that some agents may misrepresent things to their clients, whether it be the seller and misrepresenting the procedures that need to be followed, or what concessions look like and those kinds of things, or the buyer and how buyers are going to be paid, things of that nature. They're concerned about the misuse and increased use of advanced fees. Essentially, if you recall back in the day where there were lots of foreclosures, a lot of bad actors were charging people that were in foreclosure or threatened with foreclosure advanced fees in order to represent them in getting those foreclosures stayed. A lot of people were ripped off, and as a result, the legislature passed some legislation banning advanced fees by real estate professionals, except under very specific exemptions and exceptions, and only after the Department of Real Estate approved the methodology. Now, let's say, for example, you have a buyer who you want to make sure is going to have the money necessary to pay you and you take an advance retainer type of money, put it in your trust account and hold it until the escrow closes, at which time it'll be transferred to escrow and paid back to you, or paid directly out of your trust. We're still going to be working on some of those issues between now and August. But you've got to go to the Department of Real Estate and have your program approved before you can do that, or you may end up in a disciplinary hearing with the department. I thought it was interesting that they are preparing for more dual agency. I personally don't know if that's really going to happen. I mean, I'm thinking about it as a consumer. If I have a specific house in mind, yeah, then maybe there'll be an increase in dual agency because the listing agent is the same person I'm going to deal with. Maybe I don't need to go to a buyer. Maybe I'll work out a deal with the listing agent, and that will increase dual agency. But if I've simply decided on an area and I want to look at a lot of houses, does that necessarily mean I want to go to the listing agent for 5, 10, 15 houses? I don't think so. But then again, we'll see how this all plays out in the marketplace. But the Department of Real Estate is preparing for increased dual agency. They also are planning, budgeting wise, for fewer people entering the industry. They believe that it's gotten too complicated in some ways, and there's going to be fewer people. Nobody knows that for sure. So again, they want to make sure that you understand that even though the procedures and some of the practices are going to change, you still have a fiduciary obligation, which is in both the Business and Professions Code, as well as in the Code of Ethics, that you put your client's interest ahead of your own, and that you be aware of the obligations that you have to clients to provide material information and being truthful. They want to make sure you understand that you are obligated to disclose your agency relationship. And the good news is, if you use the BRBC, the CAR buyer broker form, you will automatically get bundled with that form a disclosure of agency under the code that will be perfectly satisfactory for discharging those obligations. They want to make sure that you understand that all commissions will continue to be negotiable. They want you to understand that all of that compensation is going to be fully disclosable by you to the client, and that you do so. Now, CAR is going to be issuing forms in June, that will cover all of that. And they already have out a broker compensation advisory that you should take a look at. That's already available. Again, make sure you understand and talk to your lawyers about advance fees and how they can work and how they can't work. And then for brokers, make sure you update your policies, your rules, your procedures, your systems, that you develop policies for overseeing, for training on all of these implementation issues. Again, a reminder that as of August 13th of 2024, CRMLS will be implementing all of these rule changes, which will include, there will be no fields for offering compensation from the listing agent to the buyer, or the seller to the buyer, that there will be concession fields where you can indicate to a prospective buyer that you are willing to consider, under the right circumstances and for the right offer, paying a portion or all of the buyer's fees. And there'll be a place to put percentages that you're willing to pay, and or a dollar figure that you're willing to consider under the right circumstances. Before you start, quote unquote, touring with a prospective buyer, you must have a buyer representation agreement. You will not need to file it with the MLS, at least under the current thinking. But if you're asked for a buyer representation agreement that includes compensation, you will have to produce it. And if you fail to produce it, you will be hit with a fairly significant fine and denied access. That is a 35,000-foot view of what's happening. Obviously, there'll be a lot more between now and August the 13th. We're going to be talking about things like best practices, how to actually meet with your broker, a buyer, and talk to them about your services, your value, and how you came about your compensation. All of those things are still being worked on. What you need to do is start getting yourself familiar with the forms. We just finished a newsletter that will be published in a very short while, so keep an eye out for that. That newsletter covers all of the settlement related forms that will be coming out, including a revised VRBC, a revised RLA, new forms to help with the transition period for modification of already existing listings and buyer representation agreements. All of that's coming down the road. So just be aware and stay educated. The association is doing a bang-up job of pushing information out, but you got to pay attention. All right, well, that's my rant for today. The next time we're going to go over the final rules and some new MLS policies on how these will actually be implemented. And then I want to talk a little bit about the new Department of Labor regulations. So for now, this is John Giardinelli, Association Counsel, and I'm signing out. Thank you very much.